to make copies and hand out, and I totally didn't read that email.
It's all right,
Tis.
because I have a backup.
Got a plan.
If plan A fails,
Of course,
That's
what do? You
Go
get yourself another plan.
plan.
That's right. And that's what you have to do.
Uh-huh.
It's not that I don't trust the pastor. I would hope he would do the same for me, because I'm forgetful too.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, you have nothing to hold this week, but next week you should. Bear with me for my voice as well. I'm just getting over this. This is actually the best I've sounded in about a week. So, I have my coffee. I guess that'll probably have to do. So I'll be running everything from my phone. But I'm excited. This lesson is called Try the Spirits, and it's by Brother Herbert Morehart. And I wrote an introduction this week. I don't know. I mean, I know that I don't have any of the material necessarily of his stuff this week, but I want to do an introduction of my own, and then next week we'll be getting into the book. Actually, it'll be his introduction too. So, but that's the way that I like to do things: is just to gather all the information I can think of. Then, because I have to understand it first before anybody can teach something. We're going to look at that today. Before you can know something, in 1 John, we'll be looking a lot in 1 John today. I'll be handing out some scriptures. 1 John chapter 2, if you want to turn there now, it'd be good. But in order to know something, thank you. That's your time. That's wonderful. So, in order to know something, you have to first know. In order to teach something, in order to be grounded in something, you first have to know it yourself. Right? If you said, Brother Andy, I need you to build me a computer, I could do that. Now I need you to build me a car. I couldn't do that. I wouldn't expect you to trust me to ask questions, answer questions, and be a reliable source of information on building an automobile. I wouldn't think you would trust that, and you shouldn't trust that. And so, when it comes to the scriptures, John tells these churches that we're reading this letter, says, you know the scriptures. You don't need anyone to teach you. It says you have the Holy Spirit to teach you. And because you know the truth, now you can set everything else against that and say, because I've studied the original, I've studied the actual truth, now I know what's not truth. As opposed to studying a whole bunch of things that aren't truth, well, now you don't really know what is truth. But if we study the truth, then we know it. Now we can gauge whatever else comes against that. And there's going to be lots of stuff that come against that. That's the whole point to try the spirits. As we're going to see, that there's basically two categories that I am learning about with try the spirits, and that's, I think first and foremost is doctrine. And so when we try the spirits, what we're doing is we're comparing with what's in the scriptures, what's in the Bible, with what we've just heard, or what another teaching is. That's trying the spirits. Another way to try the spirits is in our own lives every single day. And we'll get into that later. So let me go ahead and pull up our lesson, and I'll start reading here. Has anyone heard of Brother Morehart before? Herbert Morehart? I know you guys have. What book did we go through with his?
I don't know if we've actually done
I thought we did one.
I think we did
Did we?
one. Yep.
Zion? Dwelling of Zion?
That was Gary Smith.
Oh, it was Gary Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Could have sworn we went through him.
He's got like 17 books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't have the book with me, but it actually on the very front cover of it, on the inside cover, it has all of his books.
Oh, I know which one. Suffering, Suffering for Christ.
Suffering to reign, or
Suffering to reign. Yes, that's right.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Was that Wednesday night? It was probably Wednesday.
Probably was, yeah.
Okay.
was he the one that wrote the Song of Songs? Song of Solomon?
That was Brother Edward Bird.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great book.
Mhm.
It's funny because everyone I've talked to about Brother Bird they have the same things to say. And I was talking to Brother Dave Barham last week, and he said the same thing about Brother Bird. Is just you read a sentence, then you have to stop yourself and like, all right, I need to go read that again. Because there's so much packed into it, and you think he's got to take a break. One of these sentences just could be Jesus wept,
Yeah.
But no, he just packs tons into it.
Yeah.
And you really have to keep up, you know, and sometimes I'd like to say I know where he's going with it. Sometimes I don't think I know where he's going with it, but,
I don't think he knew how to write a throwaway sentence.
no. I mean, I don't know if it was just his writing style that he learned, his age, that maybe he had a lot of time to put a lot of, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's all the above, but he was a great writer,
Yeah.
and he had very, very insightful thoughts. I don't know of anyone else who could write that about the Song of Solomon. That's kind of a tough book. So, yeah, I mean, I had you turn to 1 John, but we're gonna, I'll be handing out some scriptures and then we can read. I actually have all the scriptures printed out here, so. My introduction says, when the disciples asked Jesus what events would surround the time of his return, he was straight to the point. There would be much deception going on, much more than the world they currently lived in. Ever thought about that? And the very first thing, let's just go there. Let's go to Matthew 24, verse 4. The disciples were very, very curious. In fact, they had just gotten done. They were on their way back to Jerusalem, right? This is now the end of Matthew. So now we're looking at the end of you know, the closing out of Jesus' ministry. And it's interesting. I kind of like this. Jesus kind of turns the tables on them. Of course, he literally turned tables, didn't he? But here he turns the tables on the disciples. Chapter 24, verse 1, it says, then Jesus went out and departed from the temple. And his disciples came up to show him the buildings of the temple. So now they want to impress upon Jesus the magnificence of these buildings. Herod had just completely taken that the area of Jerusalem. I was watching this thing on Israel, and they have like with the mountain, Mount Zion, and the area around there of remember Jerusalem's on a hill, right? So what Jerusalem used to look like was kind of hilly and stuff, and they built fortifications. They built, you know, David was, you know, he had his, you know, citadel up there. He had his palace up there on Mount Zion, and then he have the old part of the city and all that. Well, that was all well and good, but Herod came along, and Herod, you know, right around the time of Jesus, was an architect with a lot of power, a lot of servants, and a lot of money. And he says, all right, this is going to be my capital. And he took the entire, and this guy, or Benjamin Netanyahu, was giving a tour. And there was this like diorama of Jerusalem. And what it used to look like was kind of hilly and stuff. He said, here's what Herod did. And he takes off this top section of this plastic, you know, diorama, puts on a new one, and it's all flat. He flat topped it. He raised hills, and he leveled them, made it up, you know, smooth. And then he starts building these temple structures. And so he built the temple, he built and you should see it, there's a whole lot more to it. But it's just gorgeous with these walls and these gates and the buildings and all that. It wasn't just the temple. But he made it much more, you know, visually pleasing. And so you'd have to understand that at this time, this was a very, very nice looking place to be. And so the disciples, when he walked out of the temple, they wanted him to just take a look at this and just say, wow, admire these buildings. This is gorgeous, you know. But Jesus turned it around and said, yeah, I see them, but I want you to see them. Isn't that what he says? And Jesus said to them, do you not see all these things? Assuredly I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down. Whoa. It's like saying, take someone to your city to show them around, you know, and hey, this is great, right? All this is going to be destroyed. Not really impressed here, you know, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And so then we got to thinking, that wasn't the reaction we thought he'd have. We thought he'd be really impressed by coming to the Jerusalem. You know, they, of course, as Jews, they all went to Jerusalem at least once a year for Passover. And so they thought that Jesus would have a different reaction. And when he didn't, it got them thinking. Well, now we just mentioned the destruction of the temple. What else is going to happen? You know, we know that you've talked about these things. Well, let's talk about it some more. And so as he sat down on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately saying, tell us when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? And this is what the very first thing that Jesus says, when we talk about, the Lord's, or the model prayer, and how, the very, very beginning is giving praise to God. Holy is your name, and then talking about his kingdom. Well, to me, the very first thing Jesus says here is, look out for deception. And that's really what our lesson is going to be on, is looking out for deception. Not just doctrinally, but in our everyday lives. Right? And so, verse 4 says, and Jesus answered and said to them, take heed that no one deceives you. Why would that be the very first thing that he says?
There's so many deceivers today.
Exactly. And then look at verse 5. It says, for many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. Now, I don't think that literally means I am, some people are running around saying that they're Jesus. Yeah, there's been crazies like that. But what he's talking about is, in this new age, in the church age, in the last days, the last, 5,000, or 5th millennium and 6th millennium, one that we're in now, in those 2 last days of man's existence, if you will, on this earth, we see that there's going to be rampant deception. And it's not going to be deception with, people aren't going to, in droves, go toward, what they were going toward, which would be like the multi-god system, or the, human sacrifice system. All that was going to change. And so now Satan, in his deception, is now going to sprout up churches. Right? So we have the Catholic Church. We have other huge denominations, that are grabbing people away, that look and say that they are Jesus. Right? They look and they feel, as it were. They're not saying that they're somebody else. They're coming and they're saying that I am the Christ. And so we see here that Jesus said that they will deceive many. That's going to be the majority of the deception, is through these churches. And so just as I look at it as different time frames. You have the temple in the Old Testament, and you had animal sacrifices and all that. Well, what were the nations doing? Satan, they had temples that they worshipped. And if you study ancient history at all, you understand that they had temples, and you understood that they did sacrifices. What's that sound like? Doesn't that sound like the Mosaic Law? See, Satan is a master at this deception, at this mimicry. And what do you have in the New Age? You have the church that Jesus came to establish, and what do you have? 1 million churches out there. So it's no wonder that those two go hand in hand. And so, let's see here that he said that there would be much deception. And along with that, verse 6, it says, and you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. So, and I kind of look at that like, especially like in the 60s. Of course, I wasn't alive, but some here that remember that decade.
You missed a good.
And there you go.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I'm sure it was. But you guys had, some, you had bomb drills or earthquake drills or whatever, right? And I watched enough, documentaries and TV shows to understand that it was a time that people were genuinely afraid that there would be World War III. And so, with the Soviet Union doing their thing and us as the two superpowers diametrically opposed to each other in ideology and the armies that we had and all that, there was a real chance of that. But at the same time, Jesus said all these things are the beginning of sorrows. He's saying just because you hear that someone's in a war, even if it's a world war, you're not going, that doesn't signal that I'm going to come back. So these things have to happen. But don't be afraid of those things. Remember, this isn't triggering my return. He's saying these things have to happen, but it's just part of the plan. You have something?
Rumors of wars. I mean, there's right now there's rumors of wars. Iran getting the nuke.
Right.
So that's all kind of in kind of a perspective thing. But that's the big thing. That's why Netanyahu came here to warn us that hey, if Iran gets a nuke, there's going to be war. So there's rumors of war. Of course, wars going on right now. There's bloodbath going on over there. So we're living in this time, so we can wrap our minds around what he's saying here. Because these are the last days he was pointing to. We're in these last days.
Yeah, and there's definitely, you know, there's been wars over the years, and he's saying like, all these things are gonna come to pass. But just because that happens, doesn't mean that it signals it. He's saying, yeah, it's gonna happen, you know, and there will be that at the time of my return. He says, but here's what I really want you to look for, and that's the abomination of desolation and all those things. That signals, okay, now, it's really happening now. But he's saying here that, that there's gonna be a lot of deception in the last days. And so, this led the Apostle John to write about this in his first letter. Leading up to his admonition to not be deceived, he first starts out talking about where our focus should be. So back in 1 John, chapter 2. We'll go ahead and give Sister Tanya 1 John 2, 15 through 17.
Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it, but he who does the will of God abides forever.
So this is admonition before he talks about deception. Believe me, John talks a lot about deception, because this is the main reason I think he wrote the letter. But before he gets there, he stops and says, look, if our hearts aren't in the right place, we're setting ourselves up for that deception to happen and to come knock us over. And so he's saying we have to deal with ourselves first. That's what I was talking about earlier with, there's deception coming in from, you know, the external, as it were, from false doctrine. Then there's the deception that starts in our heart. Well, that's okay to do that. It's okay to love that. It's okay to go there, or whatever the case might be, because, you know, or whatever reason. And so we give ourselves excuses. So he's saying that if we don't love the world and the things in the world, we're keeping ourselves on guard. And that's really what we're talking about when we talk about trying the spirits, is keeping ourselves on guard. If we constantly do that, that's not something that, you know, hey, we have the truth, we're good, we don't have to be on guard. No, trying the spirits, to me, says we need to keep ourselves on our toes, spiritually speaking, or else we are going to be bowled over by some new doctrine that comes along. And that's really the onus that I'm getting from this lesson, is that it's not just doctrine when we're talking about trying the spirits. It's a personal relationship as well. So not loving the world or the things in the world. You know, I've noticed over the years that anything that I desire, you know, as far as you know, material things, as it were, they can all fit into these three categories. Have you ever noticed that? The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, or the pride of life. Anything that's worldly, as it were. I'm not saying that we can't have possession. I mean, obviously, we have to. But it's actually where your heart is in relation to those things. That's really where the difference is. And so, it's if we love those things, and we can look at our lives at times, and the lives of people who don't care anything about God. Where's their focus? It's on one of these three areas. And it's always going to be fit nicely into one of these three areas: the pride of life, the lust of the flesh, or the lust of the eyes. And so, yeah.
And even some of the so-called religions out there, that's what their ministers, that's what they do. I mean, they've got this lust, you know, to more money.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where a lot of that deception comes in, is that it's cleverly hidden with religion over it. And I was in the break room the other day at work, and this guy who was a saved person, I respect him, and he knows where I stand. And there's this other guy who completely doesn't care about anything, and so anything to do with faith or God, and he was in there, and this other guy, they were getting into a conversation, and the second that he started sensing that my saved friend was talking about, you know, God, he said, I don't do religion. He says, religion's not for me, I don't get into that. He's like, well, what, and he kept using the word religion. He said, well, would it surprise you if I told you I don't like religion either? And that's really what, it's true. There's religion, there's, dogmas, there's you do it because you're told to do it. Well, that's not a personal faith. And by the way, it's not going to last, and it's not going to be sincere. faith is different than religion. Tons different. You can be religious about a lot of things that have nothing to do with faith. But at the same time, we're called on to have faith, right? And so religion is not going to get you through a situation, but your faith in God will. So, yeah, there's definitely a difference. And I really don't like, I got this other guy who always says, down with religion, you know. Well, I can't blame him, because he's looking at the world history and saying, you know, like when the Catholics attacked, you know, they tried to colonize some place, they would force the Native Americans to either be baptized or they would kill them. It's like, well, what's that all about? You know, that actually makes me mad that they would do that. Muslims are the same way. Look at their history. You know, these people have a bloodied history. And so we see here that we're not called upon to force people. We're called upon to share the word and let the seed fall where it may. And we're praying that it's on good hearts. And that's faith. There's a big difference there. So let's go to, if Allie could read verse, 1 John. Of course, we're in the same, basically we're just going to be just going down that same chapter. So if you want to read verse 18 and 19, please.
Little children, it is the last hour, and as we have heard that the Antichrist is coming, even now many Antichrists have come, by which we know that it is the last hour. They went out from us, but they were not of us. For if they had been of us, they would have continued with us. But they went out, that they might be made manifest, that none of them were of us.
So John, this is what I really like is, and we can see this in the New Testament, not so much with Paul, because Paul wasn't one of the 12 apostles, but Peter was, John was, James. You know, I like when they write about the lessons that they learned when they were with Jesus. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And so John's doing the same thing here. John remembered the words of Jesus when the apostles asked him about the time of his return. He was confident that they were in the last hour because of what he saw currently going on around him. And so, would there be rampant deception? Absolutely. And that's what John saw. And so he says that, you know, you've heard that the Antichrist is coming. That is a definite article. That the great deceiver, if you will, is coming. He said, but even now, many people that have put themselves in the place of Christ, which is really what that means. Actually, the Strong's defines that as somebody who is an opponent of the Messiah. Right? So isn't the Antichrist, isn't he the biggest opponent of the Messiah? I would say so. But he's saying even now there's opponents of Jesus out there. And so he says that, you know, you've heard that the big one's coming, if you will. But even now there's many Antichrists that have come, by which we know that it's the last hour. What did they ask Jesus? How are we going to know that it's the last hour? Because of all these deceptions. And so apparently these churches have had people that have left from among them to go start other works, steal away disciples, try to poison them. And that's why he says they went out from us, but they were not of us. For if they had been of us, they would have continued with us. Isn't that kind of a no-brainer?
Mm-hmm.
If they really were a part of the body and harmonious, they would have stayed. And they would have grown with you, and they would have exhorted you, and all those things. But they went out that they might show that they weren't of us. That none of them were of us. So that's John remembering the things that Jesus taught him. And so this next section here, verse 20, we'll give that to Brother Noah. 20 and 21, please.
Be ye of an unction from the Holy One, and you know all things. I have not written unto you because you know not the truth, but because you know it, and that no lie is of the truth.
You know, one of the biggest things these days that really bothers me is that people don't think they can know the truth. You know, I had somebody ask me, we were kind of getting into it a little bit, and it was about a faith subject a couple months ago, and he stopped me and said, are you an expert on these things? And he's like, you know, because I was speaking from, what's the word, conviction, I guess you could say, would be the best word. And I wanted to say, yeah, actually I am, you know. Because John told his church you know the truth. You don't take a stand, you know, it's even these people that have come out and, in the media that have, there's a situation going on and then they tweet something stupid or whatever, it's their opinion, right? What happens? They get lambasted for it. They get shamed into what? Some sort of apology, right? Who was it? Somebody said, I don't even like him, I think it might have been Bill Maher, I can't stand that guy. But even he said, look, can't we have a society where we can make comments and not be judged for that? Whatever happened to having an opinion? And just being able to say that and not have a fear of retribution. That's what this country was founded on. And so why should we be shamed by the media or shamed by, the powers that be out there from either side of the fence and say, why should you have said that and we're gonna boycott you and it's like all this backlash. They don't want that backlash, so they just said, I'm sorry, right?
Well, you know what gets the worst backlash or whatever, if the comment is of a spiritual or conservative nature, that's what gets the attention. So what they're trying to do is funnel everyone's thinking into kind of a one stream thought from the top down. In other words, what's administrated, what's dictated, what's policed, the thought police. That's what's shaping up our society, melting everybody into one thought.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's liberal.
Politically incorrect.
Yeah, and I've said before, everybody wants everybody to be tolerant, but what those people aren't tolerant of is
Right.
intolerance.
Yeah.
Intolerant about.
Yeah.
Right. So you have your people that are pushing tolerance. Why would you make a comment like that? You need to be tolerant. Well, the whole thing is that they are not. There's something that they are intolerant of, and that's intolerance. Right. So they don't want us to just voice our opinion if it goes against theirs.
They're only tolerant when you agree with them.
Exactly.
Right.
But they're the same ones who are yelling, everyone should be free of speech and
Exactly.
all of that. And then when you do, then you're wrong if you don't agree
Right.
with them, so you can't win.
And so there is definitely, I guess what irks me is that, people can't just take a stand these days without getting a fear of backlash. And the people that have stood by their word, I applaud them for that. Even if it's slightly off, I applaud them for taking the stand to not back down.
But even sometimes it can even get you into trouble though, because if I declare in the middle of an elementary school that I believe in spanking a child, because that's what the Bible teaches, you could be in trouble for that, like.
Your kids could get taken away.
Yeah, we can't just give our
Sure.
opinion and say, hey, too bad, you have to hear us too, cause now you can get in trouble for some of
Sure.
those things.
It's swung over too far now where the courts are involved and we let it slip away from us, as it were.
Even if it's your own child,
Yeah.
that you want to
Yes.
discipline
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
in
right.
a public place, you've gotta be very careful about it.
But if that child wants to have an abortion or whatever,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
free to do that.
It was funny because Ann and I were watching, with the kids, Dolphin Tale. It's based on a true plays, true stories, and all that. You should have seen it at the very beginning of the movie. This team of, it was down in Florida. This team of at this preserve where they rehabilitate dolphins. They got the call. Dolphin in trouble. So we're talking about like everybody's running, sirens are going off. People are like, code red, everyone's lined up around this beach that are just watching all these volunteers, and you have, the main characters run out into the ocean, and this dolphin's like, and they run out there, and they're trying to do CPR, and everything. It's just this big melee,
Mouth to mouth.
and I whisper over to Hannah, I said, these are the same people who believe in abortion.
Yeah.
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 Yeah,
It just makes me sick.
yeah, exactly.
Why they would make that big of a deal over an animal. God bless animals, I love animals, we shouldn't be mean to animals. But at the same time, those are the same people that say, oh, it's your choice to kill somebody.
Right.
Wow, how messed up is that?
Crazy.
So, but anyway, and then that's the thing, is that it leads us to the scriptures again, is it's the truth that we can have a handle on. The Bible never said just go find your own way and try to make it fit with other. No, it says there is a truth. There's a truth, we can know it, and that's what John says here.
Right.
It says, I have not written to you because you do not know the truth, he says, but because you know it, and that no lie is of the truth. He had confidence that they knew the truth. So what's that tell us? Is that when we hear doctrine, new doctrine, it might be true, but it might not be true. That's where we need to test the spirits. And so we need to test it to see if it is of, and this, going to bring us to our theme verse in a couple chapters. But he says, look, you have to decipher what is truth and what is not. Oh, and by the way, you can know the truth. It's not something you have to guess at. And who's there to give us that truth? Was it some guy that started our faith 200 years ago?
Mhm.
No. I had the Jehovah's Witnesses come to my door. Hannah was kind of, I don't know, she didn't really tell him off, I'd already done it once years ago. I thought it was good. No, and so she kind of just, took the material and was, took off in the car, and she was already leaving. Of course, and she said, well, I want you to talk to my husband when he comes back. Sure enough, they showed up on a Saturday, some Saturdays ago. And I knew kind of what to expect as far as talking to him. And I said, look, guys, the woman and the older man, I said, I appreciate your zeal. I said, I'm trying to do the same thing. I said, but I don't agree with you guys, and I'm not ever going to agree with you guys. I'm not going to take your material. I said, I'm a landmark missionary Baptist. I said, and I don't agree with what you're teaching. And last time I went into doctrine and the history of their church, and this time I didn't bother doing that. So it's forceful, but I'm polite, because remember, that's us on the other side of that, when we witness as well. So I'm not rude. We shouldn't be rude, because we're people too. But at the same time, we need to stand our ground. And so, there's definitely a truth to know. And so he says, yes, not written to them because they don't know the truth, but because they do know it. And that no lie is of the truth. And so, God's given us the Holy Spirit, right? It wasn't started by some man 200 years ago. He's given us the Spirit to be able to discern what's truth or not. Doesn't mean that we're going to, as new Christians, as older Christians, whatever, we're just going to know instantly, oh, that's got to be truth, that's got to be a lie. No, that's what the admonition is. Test the spirits. Prove it. I like when people get up here, in messages over the years and say, don't take my word for it. There's somebody, I can't remember who, but he's very famous for saying that. He says, look, I've just spoken to you, but don't just take my word for it. You go search these things out yourself. Remember remember in school they always talk about the Bereans. Remember that in Acts? The Bereans heard the word, but then they went privately and said, I'm going to look this up, and I'm going to see if what he said was true. That's what we should all be doing. Because if it's the pastor's faith, if it's the Sunday school teacher's faith, if it's your teacher's faith, it's not going to be your faith. It has to be your faith.
Right.
You have to know the scriptures. As much as we love our pastor, he's not going to be standing there in judgment for me.
That's right.
It's going to be mean. It's going to be you have something.
Well, I was just in the beginning of this passage, I don't remember what verse it was, I think it was in the very first one, about being deceived. Oh, it was over in Matthew. We can't be deceived if we know the scriptures. So to me, I remember in Yuba City years ago, we did a ladies' conference, and that was the theme of it, about being deceived. And you think about it, if you know a subject in and out, how can you be deceived? You can't.
Yep.
Just like a computer, somebody brought you a computer, and you know computers inside and out, and they're trying to give you a line, you're like,
Yeah. Right.
because you know it.
Right.
And I think that's why that we're charged to know the word.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's absolutely Dean. Yes.
And what you're saying as far as being our faith and not your faith, like people like Jim Baker and things like that. So many people lost their faith when he fell, but that was the fact. They didn't have a faith of their own.
Right.
They had his faith,
That's right.
and they, and I feel sorry for him because he was a stumbling block, and he will be held accountable for that.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. And it kind of, it is sad because, and that goes to me more like into religion than a personal faith. I'm motivated because I see he's doing all the work and I'm just kind of following him, Well, we have to get up, you know, and do the work ourselves as well. And then the admonition is in a body, in a church body, is to help each other. That's really how we can accomplish these things, is when we help each other. That's why Jesus set the church up. You know, something.
I was just gonna say, not only Jim Baker, but all of man's personal empires will fall, and several have already fallen. You know, Joel Osteen, he'll be another one. They'll come and go. You know, Oral Roberts, all of them. But that's why the local church, like you just said, the power is in the church, locally here, not some big highfalutin television ministry or whatever. Okay. The word that Noah read, the unction, means anointing, and I just looked at Vicky's. It says anointing for that word unction. So the church has been anointed.
Yeah.
Okay, unction, anointed. Okay, with that Spirit to teach us and guide us.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And that's really what helps us with the truth. Are we gonna know? No, we're not gonna know every little thing. But that's where God said, look, pray about it, research the scriptures, do the things that I've given you already. I guess John's point is, you don't have to go outside of that to get the truth. You don't have to go outside the church to get the truth. You don't have to consult somebody else other than the Lord. You don't have to, you know, there's only one Spirit given to the assembly. So he's saying, look, you know, you have all the tools to decipher. You have all the tools to try the Spirit. It's all there. All you got to do is ask. And so, and it doesn't hurt to ask other people too. Somebody that's, you know, maybe studied the scriptures more and has broken it down more, and then decide for yourself. Look, this is the truth. John said, look, there was people who didn't agree with that. And where are they now? They've left. They've started their own works. They're wrong, right? He says, you know, flat out that they're wrong, but that's what they did, so that they would be exposed that they really weren't of the truth. So he says, so one of the first things that John warned would happen was Christ's deity would come under attack. Ever notice that? False religions love to do that. Satan at all costs must make man believe that Jesus was anyone and everybody, just not God's son. And that's what he says here. So he says, verse 22, he says, who is a liar but he who denies that Jesus is the Christ? He is Antichrist, who denies the Father and the Son. Whoever denies the Son does not have the Father either. He who acknowledges the Son has the Father also. What's one of the best ways to tell if something isn't true when you hear it? Is that they've stripped Jesus of his deity. Oh, he's really not the Son of God. He was a good teacher. Or, yeah, he might have been the Son of God, but he had a brother. You know, it's like you're trying to take, you know, oh, he's one of, you know. No, he's not one of. He is the only begotten Son of God. And so, so he's saying that that's one of the very first things that John warned would happen, is that Jesus' deity would come under attack. So the spirit of Antichrist is anyone who takes the place of the real Christ. Of course, Strong's defines Antichrist as an opponent of the Messiah. Like I said earlier, the best way to decipher the truth is to study the real thing. Therefore, John admonishes the disciples not to deviate from what they heard from the apostles, having been directly with Jesus from the beginning. Isn't that what he said in verse 24? Sister Linda, could you read 24 for us, please?
Let that therefore abide in you, which you have heard from the beginning. If that which you have heard from the beginning shall remain in you, you shall also continue in the Son and in the Father.
Isn't that one of the qualifications that he gives for knowing the truth? That which was from the beginning, right? Study that from the beginning. Saying all these things are going to sprout up along the way. But you need to go back to the beginning. And by the way, guess who was there with him in the beginning? John, right? Peter, James, you know, Jesus. Paul had personal experience with talking with Jesus and being. If you read that there, and I think it's 1 Corinthians. But he had personal training from Jesus himself. And so, and Paul wrote half the New Testament. And so we see that he's saying, look, don't just take my word for it. He says, I was with Jesus, and I'm telling you these things. And he's saying, take what you're hearing over here from these other people and compare it to what you learned in the beginning. And so that's what we need to do as well. We need to be trying the spirits, testing these things, studying these things, talking about these things, so that they're cemented in our minds as the truth, and that way we'll know when we're trying to be deceived. And so, I'll wrap this up here for today. This leads us to our theme verse. So let's go to just two chapters over, 1 John 4. Then we'll look at 1 through 3. So John's building up to his point, talking about deception, talking about how they left us, they weren't really of us. He says, "Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, whether they are of God." Of course, the old King James says, "Try the spirits," right? So test the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. Already at that time. This is a couple of decades from when Jesus had ascended. There's already false prophets. He says, "By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is of God. And every spirit that does not confess that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is not of God. And this is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard was coming, and now already is now already in the world." So, there's a lot to it, confessing that Jesus came in the flesh and not confessing. There's a lot to that. There's a lot of intricacies and details and all that. But he's saying, bottom line, they're going to mess with Jesus' deity. Right? They're going to strip him of some sort of deity of his place and all that. But that's their MO. So he says here, test the spirits. This is where Brother Morehart got the title for his book. So the Lord gave us the truth to defend. In order to do that, we must constantly reaffirm what we believe. Otherwise, we may be susceptible to deception. See, that's an important thing I think we overlook sometimes. But it's not, testing the spirits isn't just for doctrine. As we saw earlier in John chapter 2, we must constantly guard ourselves from deception that comes not only from false doctrine, but sin in its various forms. Maybe we'll get into that next week. So there's some scriptures I have there for that. But for now, gives us an introduction into the study. And I've read a couple pages of the book so far. And it's good stuff. Good stuff. All right, anybody have anything else? Thanks for your participation and comments.
So I have 2 lessons to hand out next week.
Yeah. And I guess, I don't know how we're gonna work that. I guess maybe just fold them or binders or something, because there's gonna be lots of paper. But we'll figure it out.
Okay.
All right, let's go ahead and dismiss. Dear Lord, we give thanks for this day and for allowing us, Lord, to meet here to worship you. And thankful, Father, for helping us to assemble, giving us, Lord, the blessing to be able to do that. And very thankful, Father, for these words, Lord, from your word that we've heard. And we do pray, Lord, that you'd give us wisdom in what we study and what we know, Lord, and what we regard as truth, Father. We pray that we would be searching these things out. Thankful, Father, again for your Spirit and his meeting, Lord, with us today. We pray that we would be blessed, Father, and be a blessing to others. Pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Yeah.